Charles Robinson, writer for Yahoo Sports, on the case that the NFL presented against Deshaun Watson in the disciplinary hearings and some of the issues with it. This is from the Pod to Win the Game podcast.
From what I understood, the way the league presented was there was a lot of focus on, because of the fact that the women that they brought into the presentation before Robinson, it wasn't the women that had alleged sexual assault. It was because those women were among the 20 who settled with Deshaun Watson. So it ultimately came down to women where, and this has been reported and it's true, the league, there was no like force. There was no, there were all these elements there that would really reflect poorly for Deshaun Watson that weren't necessarily there. So the league took this really narrow scope. And what I was told was a lot of it focused on disrepute. Deshaun Watson brought disrepute upon the league himself, his teams, through all of this, through his actions. Okay. The problem with disrepute and arguing disrepute as it, concerns the personal conduct penalty, you have a hell of a lot of number of owners who, if there was a precedent of quote unquote disrepute, you would be in a hell of a lot more trouble than they really are. And we all know who those are. It's all the ones that have been sued or signed NDAs or had settlements that have been reported. Go ahead and look up the Dallas Cowboys and the cheerleader settlement.
And Tim Bielik, that's just another facet of this. That's why anybody that tells you they know how many games Deshaun Watson's going to get with the suspension, the only person that knows is Sue L. Robinson. I don't think she's told anybody.
Yeah, and part of me believes she doesn't know. And if she doesn't know, how are any of us supposed to know what's going on? And she's the one that's ultimately going to be making the decision. I thought the reporting from Charles Robinson talking about, how she may want to be giving the two sides a chance to settle. I think that's the easiest way for this to kind of go down. Just go back to the negotiating table, see what you can work out. Because I think with the buzz that's kind of come out the last few weeks, particularly in favor of Watson, that probably continues to push the indefinite ban, maybe the year-long ban, off the table. And maybe it's to a point where the NFL just kind of has to cut their losses and say maybe it's, half the season is kind of about where it kind of stands. Because, again, the last thing I think the NFL wants, considering the PR backlash, is for this to go to federal court. And I know what Daniel Walk was saying, Deshaun Watson's likely to lose, but you're talking again about a conduct policy where owners are supposed to be held to a higher standard than players, and then the owners kind of barely get a slap on the wrist for any of their transgressions. You're still opening this can of worms, and with the way the NFL didn't present much quality evidence, maybe it's almost in their best interest to try and settle to avoid, possibly not being put in a position to levy any punishment. Because again, if Judge Robinson comes out and says there's no punishment, case closed, the NFL won't be able to appeal, and Deshaun Watson's able to play week one. So maybe it is in their best interest to sit down with Watson and just try one more time to see if they can negotiate something before she makes her decision.
Yeah, and with all the NFL has going on, the last thing they want to do is deal with Jeffrey Kessler, who is the NFLPA's lawyer, and a lawsuit that he's going to come up with. You've got Schneider, you've got the Gruden. There is a legal mess that the league doesn't want to have to add one more on to.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I think the important thing we have to remember, as in this case with Judge Robinson, when it comes to these legal cases, she's going to look at evidence. That's kind of where we are in this investigation thing. It's the evidence that the NFL brought forward, and then the PR that's going to come off of this, how the league is going to look, say, if Deshaun Watson, if she says 4 games, but Roger Goodell turns right around with an appeal and says 17, it's just going to create a huge PR backlash. And I think these days, more than any other, perception matters just as much as reality. And it obviously, this whole thing is just a mess. So I think the best thing for everybody is just get some closure, just come to an agreement, just sit down at the table, work something out so everybody can move on before training camp. So it's not in Judge Robinson's hands, because again, I've said before, she's a wild card because she's never done this before. We have no precedence for how she's going to go one way or the other in terms of, her ruling and her recommendation. So, maybe it's just come up with a known, pick a number that everybody agrees with, and just kind of move on, because this has just been, a messy situation that I think everybody just kind of wants to be over.
Yeah, I agree. The NFL can't get out of the courts enough and back onto the football field, and training camp is awaiting. Tim Bielik.